All right, breaking right now on Spectrum News, we're going to go ahead and bring you an update now from the Florida Department of Agriculture on a months-long investigation. Commissioner Nikki Fried speaking now. Let's take a listen in.
Thank you for being here this afternoon. I want to first welcome Senator Geraldine Thompson. Thank you for joining. We'll hear from the senator in a moment. In March of this year, Tyree Sampson, a 14-year-old boy visiting Florida from Missouri, fell to his death from the Eagle Drop Tower in Orlando. With the magnitude of this incident, it was important to me that the department take the necessary time to conduct a thorough investigation and get this right, which I believe that we have done to the best of our ability.
You're watching Spectrum News live coverage as we, of course, listen in on a press conference here from Florida Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried, Senator-elect Geraldine Thompson. They're detailing an administrative complaint against the Orlando Eagle Drop Slingshot, the ride operator we know where 14-year-old Tyree Sampson fell to his death back in March of this year. 6 counts laid out here in that complaint. What I want to do now is to break this all down for us so we can kind of get an understanding of what this complaint details. According to the complaint, count 1 says the ride operators violated state law by operating the drop tower after having modified the harness proximity sensors on at least 2 of the seats, increasing the possible restraint opening to roughly double that of the other seats on the ride and putting patrons at risk of serious injury or death. Now, this carries an administrative fine of up to $10,000 per violation. I want to go over count 2 now here. Count 2 in this complaint from this Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. It says that the ride operators, they failed to ensure that all patrons fit properly within the contours of the seat, and by allowing the patron child to ride the drop tower, even though its seats did not accommodate someone of his size and weight, that too has a fine of up to $10,000 per violation. Count 3 now, the next count right here, it says the ride operator failed to ensure that ride employees conducted the push and pull test on every patron's restraint. Now, that's another fine of up to a $10,000 per violation. Count 4 says ride operators, they failed to adequately train ride employees on all required subjects. I know that we in the Watchdog team has covered this particular issue extensively over the past few months. Another fine there on this, up to $10,000 per violation. Count 5 here now speaks to the operator violating state law by allowing an untrained operator to work unsupervised on the drop tower. That's another fine of up to $10,000 per violation. And finally, we're going to go now to count 6. It says the ride operator failed to implement an adequate maintenance program based on manufacturer recommendations and adopted standards by failing to document work performed on the drop tower. Yeah, so we are, of course, following this very extensively. All these counts include suspension and revocation of annual permits. Want to make that very clear. And we heard Commissioner Nikki Fried there say $250,000 in fine it totaled out to. That investigation report detailing a lot of violations now. Now, in that administrative complaint, the state says through their investigation, the department discovered that the respondent's inspection and maintenance record keeping was deficient. I want to go ahead and point that out to you. Now, it goes on to say that daily inspection reports showed certain inspections as having been completed by an employee who was not in fact on duty at the time of the inspection that purportedly took place. Now, a few months ago, a person complaining to be a employee, came to us complaining that they were an employee at the Orlando Freefall ride. They sent us a video that we later learned is part of the state's investigation. Now, we held off on sharing this at the state's request after talking to them about this for several weeks, maybe even a month, I go so far as to say. And at their request, we held off on showing that video and with sharing it with you or the public. Here is what our Watchdog team uncover through our investigation. Take a look. March 25th, 2022. That's the day after Tyree Sampson fell from the Orlando Freefall ride. This is surveillance video from inside the Freefall ride property at Icon Park. The video given to Spectrum News by a person claiming to be an Orlando Freefall employee. We took this video to the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Representatives tell us that a raw copy of this video is part of their overall investigation. Scrubbing through, things look pretty routine, but take a close look. Here's where things get a bit interesting. Two people who the Department of Ag believes were hired by the Slingshot Group are looking at what appears to be a binder of documents. One of them starts to sign and check off the document with a pen. State representatives say it appears to be signing off on work that was never completed, meaning an employee likely signed off on inspection reports without actually inspecting the ride. According to the Florida Department of Agriculture, state statute says that essentially ride inspections must happen daily. It also lays out that each inspection must be recorded on a form prescribed by department rule and signed by the person who actually conducted the inspection. The video goes on to show the person who signed off on that report then takes the folder and puts it in another area of the Freefall ride property. Again, the state says this video is all part of their investigation into the Freefall accident. After the 8-month investigation, now here's a look at how we got to this point. We want to take you back now in case you may have either forgotten or may have not been keeping up with everything. You may remember that Tyree Sampson fell to his death on March 24th. On April 1st, forensic engineers were hired to investigate his death. And about 3 weeks later, Spectrum News obtained a report about what went wrong. Specifically, that report, you may remember, detailed how the Sampson seat, how his seats and safety sensors were manually adjusted. Commissioner Freed detailing that as part of one of those complaints in her overall administrative complaint. Now, a week after that, Sampson's family filed a lawsuit alleging negligence on the part of the ride operator. In late June, Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Freed provided an update in the investigation, but the ride's future remained unclear at that point. In July, Freed revealed a working framework for a new safety law that would ramp up the state's authority to regulate rides at smaller parks. Now, last month, we learned the drop tower would be taken down for good. And that brings us to this afternoon's major update about the administrative charges that we have all been waiting to hear from and waiting to see. And, a lot of this culminating to this very event. All right, now we want to go ahead and bring in, we just heard from her, we want to go ahead and have a little bit more of an intimate discussion right now with Commissioner Nikki Freed. She is standing by ready to talk with us. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Thank you so much for joining us. Curtis McLeod here with Spectrum News. We appreciate you and just wanted to go ahead and ask you here. I know that a lot went into this report, a lot into this investigation. I mean, what are you looking for as it comes to charges? You mentioned that you submitted some information to the Orange County Sheriff's Office to consider potential charges. What made you make that decision?
Well, first of all, thank you for your continuous coverage of this very important event and this issue. Because, look, what we have to always go back to is that we lost a 14-year-old boy who had a life in front of him. And so it is our responsibility as government to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again. So we made sure that we had a very, very thorough investigation. We were not going to leave any stone unturned, working with not only our department, but we've been in constant communication with the attorneys representing the Sampson family. And so we wanted to make sure that we got to the bottom of it and figured out exactly what happened, what authorizations were given, why it was going on. But most importantly, as we were going through our investigation, figuring out where things could be better from an administrative and regulatory perspective. And so that's kind of what we have done. We've gone through this investigation. We've seen that this was an intentional changing of sensors on the harness, which allowed for larger patrons to be able to still utilize the ride, even though there was a weight requirement from the manufacturer. So as we're kind of going through these steps, we wanted to make sure that we were looking at ways to make sure this wasn't going to happen again. Once our report was done, the investigation was done, now we're taking all of this material. One, we are going to be having a fine of over $250,000 against the operator and the company, which is the largest fine the Department of Agriculture has ever levied against a corporation. We are also then going to now be able to take down the ride now that the investigation is done, and taking all the things that we have learned in the course of this and sending it over to the Orange County Sheriff's Office to further investigation to make the final determination if recommendations of criminal charges are going to move forward.
Commissioner Freed, while we have you here, I wanted to also ask you, I'm looking at this complaint here, pretty extensive here, and let alone we talk about the 750 pages here for the actual investigative report. I want to focus on one thing that stood out to me. It says here, and I'm looking at page 4 if you're familiar with this. It says, in addition, daily inspection reports showed certain inspections as having been completed by an employee who was not on duty at the time of the inspection purportedly took place. I know you guys saw a number of things that you looked into. Can you kind of walk me through the scope of this? I know that we did have a video that we got a hold of that your office confirmed to us was part of your investigation, but can you speak to that a little bit about what you guys how you came to that conclusion that there seemed to be some improprieties going on here?
Yeah, what we saw is that, that while we had done the inspection, so the Department of Agriculture has a responsibility to go out and inspect the rides prior to them starting, to make sure that everything is safe, to make sure that every screw that's supposed to be in place is in place per the operator's manual and the manufacturer's manual. So we go ahead and we do that. But unfortunately, the laws and the regulatory oversight has not given the Department of Agriculture continuous oversight and the resources necessary to make sure that we are doing spot checking, that we are making sure that the individuals who are actually operating the rides are following all the protocols. And so this is why this is a very important part of where we want to move forward, is that we get the resources necessary to do the spot investigations, to come out there and to make sure that they are doing what is appropriate per the manuals and the protocols, to make sure that the employees are completely up to speed on all of the different regulations on the operations of the facilities, and making sure that they understand the ramifications for not following those manuals and those procedures. So this is kind of what our thoughts are, is to make sure that we're upping the investigations, upping the spot checks, and making sure that we've got personnel who can come out on site, on just an unannounced basis.
I do have one last question for you that I would like to ask you really quickly here. $250,000, and it says in here or more for fines and violations when it comes to the ride operator. What do you say to people say, okay, $250,000, that might sound like a lot of money for the average Joe like me, myself, but to others who may say that this corporation could write a check and pay for that, I mean, what do you say that they may be getting off the hook here?
They are definitely, without a doubt, not getting off the hook. $250,000, this is just an administrative fine. This is just the fines that we are levying here at the Department of Agriculture. We are also not, we're making them take down the ride. We're also making sure that this operator actually has businesses across the state of Florida that will go under additional scrutiny as they continue operating here in the state. Let's also not forget that there are civil lawsuits that are happening as we speak, representing both the mother and the father of this young man. Those lawsuits could potentially get into much higher numbers on the civil side, and don't forget the potential for criminal charges. So this is just an administrative fine that will be levied. All the other ramifications we don't take anything into a vacuum. It's all of the moving parts in collaboration with each other. So we feel that this fine, again, is the highest fine the department has ever levied against a corporation.
All right, now we want to go ahead and bring in the father of Tyree Sampson. Now, we've been talking with him extensively throughout the last few months here as we've been doing our continuous coverage. And Mr. Sampson, thank you so much, sir, for being with us. I know this has to be, all of this, be very difficult for you and your entire family. I know that you had the opportunity, I'm assuming so, had an opportunity to hear this latest filing from the state, this administrative complaint here. Can you tell us your immediate reactions to everything that you're hearing?
Be honest with you, Mr. McLeod, I just got in on the audio, so I'm just hearing you now as I speak. I didn't see all the other stuff you were just talking about personally.
Okay. No, that's totally fine here. Let me back up then and just kind of give you a little bit of what we know right now. And essentially, the Florida Department of Agriculture just announced an administrative complaint against the ride operators, the Orlando Eagle Drop Slingshot. They basically just said that, hey, we've done our report and we've come across the findings of our report, several counts here that we are going to impose fines on them, and basically there could be a possibility of licensing taken away. And I guess I want to ask you, in hearing that an administrative complaint has now been filed by the state in regards to this, saying that there was in fact some wrongdoing, and this organization, according to Commissioner Nikki Fried, she said that she is going to pass her investigation over to the Orange County Sheriff's Office for the possibility of charges. What's your immediate reaction to hearing something like that?
Be honest with you, Mr. Curtis, you keep up with me. We have talked a few times over these months. To be honest with you, my son came to visit me. His spirit was under arrest because he felt like personally nobody checked him at all that night. He walked up there, put himself in the seat, however that went. They kept talking, they walked past him. He asked his friend personally to check his seat thing to make sure it was locked. He did it. His friend said something to one of the workers that night about the seat. They said, oh, it's fine, the light is on. Well, they didn't even say the light was on. It was like, everything is fine. It's okay. But when my son was going up in the air, he didn't feel the same way. Personally, my son, when he came to visit me, he revealed that he felt like his life was robbed from him personally, and it should be some criminal charges. The same people supposed to was working that night is still working at Icon Park as we speak to this day. So I don't know. I'm not a scientist or person to tell you what's right and what's wrong, but I do know what the spirit would tell me, and as long as you do right, right will follow you. And God been working on this mission from day one. Working with me, using me as a vessel, speaking for me, and using me for us to give awareness to the situation, for this thing would never, ever, ever happen to a parent again in life. And hopefully it never happen to a child again in life either.